Welcome to the fifth of six videos from the Roman Army 2021 U of W lecture on life after beyond outside of war. In this video and in the next video, I'm going to look at women, family and children, looking for women and what kinds of women and so on live in Roman military spaces, building on the work of lots of great people. Okay, so in this first video, Bye Face, talking about sort of love and marriage is an institute you can't use. Okay, so how could we find women and children in Roman military spaces? If you're in person, we discuss this. So we've looked at a lot of texts, Tacitus, Vegetius, etc. So these are texts written by men, elite men for other men, particular values, patriarchal, etc., etc. Often they don't have a lot to say about women in military spaces. So you get elite women, empresses, etc., in some other contexts. But I mean, there's not a lot about ordinary soldiers in their works, but there's definitely not a lot about the or potentially ordinary partners, and they're not always aware of a lot of the wider dynamics. So in some ways you have to look beyond these, and we have to some degree already. So we've seen some inscriptions, okay, and we've looked at just recently the one with Aemilianus, his epitaph, which was put up by his two sons. Those sons didn't appear out of thin air, so obviously he had some sort of partner at some stage, whether she died in childbirth or whatever. We don't know why. Obviously she's not involved in the commemoration, but that points to the presence of women, sort of an invisible presence. There is the papyrus letter of Polion that he wrote to his family, so obviously they feature there too. His mother does as well, but I've forgotten. And then there are others. There are plenty of other papyri, some written by women, and then there are also, of course, other documentary types like the Vindolanda tablets and the Claudia Severa birthday invitation. So there are other things we can look at. And then there's also like items, things that women might use that get turn up in excavations at military sites. So there's been a lot of work recently on this. A lot of people doing great things. Dr. Green at Western University on shoes and so on, Vindolanda, and Professor Allison in Leicester in the UK on assorted sites in Europe. And there are a bunch of others. Those are only two of many. Before that, Dr. Van Murray, I always forget, I'm sorry, did a lot of stuff on these questions. So what are these items we find in archaeological settings? Well, sometimes there's like brooches. I mean, brooches are often associated with men and the kinds of cloaks and stuff they would wear, fastened together, outerwear over their bodies. But then there are things like bracelets. Now, again, I mean, one of the difficulties with a lot of small finds is who wears this? Now, if all you have is the item, it can be very difficult to know on its own who we should associate it with or what kind of person we should associate it with. A lot of men wear bracelets. We've talked a little bit about the rewards and so on soldiers might get. So some men might get bracelets as awards for excellence in combat and what have you. But we also know that women wear jewelry. We have some images of this as well from the ancient world. So some could be associated with them as well. And then there's things like rings. Move over face. So again, both men, women wear rings, but many of them could be associated with women as well. The same is true for beads. Beads on their own may not be very interesting. Beads, I'm not really a bead fan. One of my daughters I know gets into beads and necklaces, but that's one of the things that beads tell us or hint at the presence of necklaces, which could be worn by men, but also can be worn by women too. And again, it sort of varies by time, place, context, etc. Lots of issues involved with this. But when you look at all these things, and here's some more rings. No, I went the wrong way. There are other things which, in a certain old-fashioned framework, you might say, well, women cook, so cooking utensils could be associated with women. At the same time, people used to say, well, there's only men at Roman military bases, so only men would be involved in cooking. And I've already said, I think in one of the logistics or whatever videos, that there's no mess halls where they all gather together for industrially produced meals, but rather it's all done on an individual level by messmate or whatever. So if it's all men, then yeah, men are using these, but it's not always all men. So you can take all this stuff, all these items that have been found in excavations and forts and what have you, look at where they're found and try to associate them with certain people and get a sense of who was there and how they were using these items and where they were using them. And here's the next 2 slides. Just 2 slides? Yes. Highlight some of this. So here are different groups of things associated with agriculture and cutting and sharpening and combat and gaming and metalworking, and toilet is makeup and stuff. The light blue, you can see some here and here and here, writing, etc. And see where it is on these places. And there's some barracks and some temples and headquarters, etc. But we can also try to break it down, as Professor Allison has, by gender. So some definitely female, some possibly female, some maybe female or child, and some possibly child. And you can see there are some clusters in certain spots in some of the barracks possibly, but also in the headquarters building. We know it's much more likely for officers to have official marriages and partners in military bases than those who were lower ranking. So that's a thing as well. All right. Another items that I haven't mentioned yet. So those are some of those items, and there's so much written about this and more you could say, but we should also think about the shoes and the socks. In Vindolanda and other places as well, but Vindolanda, they found piles and piles and piles of shoes. And this evidence is sort of proven beyond a doubt that it was not just men living at these places, but women too, and children as well, based on the size. So there's tons of shoes, variety of shapes and sizes, and they show the presence of women in these places. Okay, what else do I want to say? Okay, now I already hinted at the letters, and so we have some documents that show the presence of women at these spaces. So here's a couple more from Vindolanda. One's a little letter. Paterna to her Lepidina. Greetings, help me God, my lady and sister. I shall bring you 2 remedies, the one for whatever, and the other for fever, and therefore, etc. There's gaps, we don't know. And then there's a famous one, the Claudia Severa birthday greeting. Claudia Severa to her Lepidina. Greetings, Lum September, sister. For the day of the celebration of my birthday, I give you a warm invitation to make sure that you come to us to make the day more enjoyable for me by your arrival, if you are present. Give my greetings to Cerealis, my Iles, and my little son. Send him their greetings. I shall expect you, sister. Farewell, sister, my dearest soul, as I hope to prosper and hail. To Sulpicia Lepidina, wife of Cerealis from Severa. So that letter is super famous. For the British Museum, you can see it. Not only is it just like shoes, we know women were there wearing things, or maybe, they were involved in cooking, or maybe they were wearing jewelry. But here they are, writing letters to each other about social activity. So it broadens our knowledge of the dynamics and relationships. Here is another one. Greeting, just as I had spoken with you, sister, and promised that I would ask Brocchus and would come to you. I asked him, and he gave me the following reply, that it was always readily permitted to me, together with something, to come to you in whatever way I can, for there are certain essential things which he will receive my letters, etc. I see a lot of gaps, but you get a sense. It talks about farewell, my sister, my dearest and most longed for soul. So just says there are those letters between soldiers who are expressing strong ties of friendship in these primary levels. So too are there women doing the same. And these are, officers' wives, a little better off, but we can imagine it at other levels as well. Now, one final category, just to say, about presence of women. There's also some evidence for women's religious cults, possibly. So we find, for instance, using Vindolanda's example, some material honoring Juno Lucina, a goddess of childbirth, and we also get mortal wives and mothers honored as well, and some tablets hint at supplies possibly used for certain things. So in the broad category of all the religious festivals, gods, cults that the Romans participated in. We also find some more closely associated with women, which also says a lot about who was there. Okay, so I'll stop there. The last video I'm going to say about what kinds of women we find.